Tuesday afternoon to you, 4 o'clock time for Sports for CLE. Thanks for joining us. Browns season ended a little bit earlier than we thought and hoped it would. Let's welcome in Browns beat reporter Mary Kay Cabot. She's from the Plain Dealer as well as cleveland.com. Mary Kay, Houston, why do you think they had so much success against this Browns defense that was so good most of the year?
Well, I think it was a lot of things. I think, first of all, the Browns ran into a really, really good quarterback in C.J. Stroud. I think he's just better this year than most people gave him credit for. And even though he's a rookie, he's not playing like it. And Bobby Slowick, his offensive coordinator, calling great games for him, really understands what his strengths are. And I think they found some weaknesses in the Browns defense. If you see some of the post-game quotes and some of the things that have come out since then, you hear C.J. Stroud saying, we knew their eyes weren't going to be disciplined in certain cases. And they weren't. I mean, they just weren't. There were certain times where he was able to completely catch them off guard with their eyes in the wrong place. That happened on 2 touchdowns, the long one to Brevin Jordan, and then the other one to Dalton Schultz, both tight ends. So I think that had something to do with it. I just don't think that the Browns were as battle-tested against really, really good quarterbacks this season as they thought they were, and I think it came back to haunt them.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, you think about it, Trevor Siemian, Clayton Tune, Joe Burrow wasn't 100% as you go through it. Let me ask you, defensively, assuming that Jim Schwartz is back, and unless he's offered a head coaching job, that's probably fair to assume. Is it reasonable to expect the defense to get even better? Because we tend to forget, this is the first year in Jim Schwartz's system.
Well, they're going to have to get better because, as I mentioned before, they were not battle-tested in the way that they originally were supposed to be by a better lineup of quarterbacks this season. You rattled off a few of them, but, they had Clayton Tune, a first-time rookie, a 5th-round pick instead of Kyler Murray. They had Trevor Siemian instead of Aaron Rodgers. They had a completely not ready to play Joe Burrow in the opener, and they didn't face him in the season finale. And then, there were other situations like that. They had Gardner Minshew instead of Anthony Richardson. And, Gardner Minshew's having a nice season, but, he still is the backup. So I just don't think that they were as battle-tested. I really think that they only defeated one really good quarterback, one premier elite quarterback, and that was Lamar Jackson. And they did beat Brock Purdy, but I think that needs an asterisk because, it has to be said, Brock Purdy was without his top weapon in Deebo Samuel that whole entire game, and he was without Christian McCaffrey in the second half. And that's really, I thought that was the difference in the game. They're a completely different team with those two guys. It would have been like the Browns being without Amari Cooper and David Njoku. I mean, how good would Joe Flacco have looked without those guys? So I just don't think the Browns were as battle-tested as perhaps they thought they were, and therefore maybe the number 1 defensive ranking, just has a little bit of an asterisk next to it.
Fair enough. Joel Bitonio talked about how the Browns build on what they had going this year heading into next season.
You just keep bringing in the right guys. It sucks because the NFL, you're probably going to have like a 20 guy turnaround, no matter what you do. But you want to bring in the right guys. You want to, focus on some of those intangibles. But I think the core is here. And when you start from the top down, ownership to Angie Berry to Coach Stefanski to the coaches to the players, like everybody's connected right now and everybody has that same vision. I think that helps out the most.
So, Mary Kay, I know you've answered this in one of your Hey Mary Kays. Is that culture the Browns built, is it sustainable heading into next year?
It is sustainable because, as Joel mentioned, it has a lot to do with the guys that you bring in. But here's the thing to remember about culture, and this is vitally important. Culture sometimes can be dictated by whether or not you're winning or losing. And sometimes a locker room that seems like it has great culture might mostly have that because they're winning. How does that culture hold up when you're losing? What if you lose 5 games in a row? There are teams that have gone through similar things and have had to pull out of a tailspin like that this season. So I think that's the thing to focus in on is what is your team going to be like? What is your culture like in times of losing? It's a whole lot harder at those times.
All right, let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason for the first time today.
Hi, Colleen. Enjoy your show. And I understand how an offense can struggle on the road to crowd noise, but I don't understand how the defense would struggle more on the road, if you can explain that. It just seems like crowd noise and other factors, if you can tackle at home, you shouldn't have missed tackles on the road either. So thanks for taking my call. Bye.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Mary Kay, he's referring to, I think it was 31 points the defense gave up average on the road, 13 at home. It's something along those lines. Just your thoughts on that.
Well, I'm going to be analyzing this a little further sometime over the next few days or so. And once again, I think it had to do with the level of the opponent. Once again, when you look at Joe Burrow, he was not ready to play in the opener, and that was a weather game. And then again, Clayton Tune, not ready for the big moment that he was playing in for the Cardinals that day at home at Cleveland Browns Stadium. And then, Trevor Siemian, and, it goes on and on. I mean, the crowd helped, and they were amazing at home, but they also didn't play a gauntlet of the best quarterbacks in the NFL at home. They didn't. And, at times when they did, I mean, Lamar beat them in Cleveland. And, it just is something that they're going to have to be cognizant of as they move into next season, because they can't rest on their laurels of we were the number one defense and we were the number one pass defense. They have to look at next season and see Patrick Mahomes coming down the pike, and they have to see Dak Prescott and Tua and Jalen Hurts and a healthy Joe Burrow and a healthy Lamar Jackson. And I think it's going to be tougher.
Yeah, and you know what? You can be sure the Pittsburgh Steelers will tweak things and find a suitable solution to their quarterback question as well. All right, you were with the Browns from Greenbrier all the way to Houston. What was your favorite moment of 2023? And I know you answer this in your Hey Mary Kays, but I'm curious.
Hands down, the Jets game and the atmosphere of that night. And even Jim Schwartz called it one of the top 5 best atmospheres that he's ever been involved in, and he's won a Super Bowl. So absolutely, that was a magical, wonderful night. The whole Flacco family there and all the boys in their little Flacco jerseys and the fireworks going off. And, the Browns, they knew that they technically weren't supposed to be there when Deshaun Watson went down with a fractured shoulder, and here they were clinching a playoff spot. And it was just so much fun. The light show with the fans involved, and Nick Chubb with the Batman mask smashing the guitar, and Max Stack with the guitar riffs. I mean, it was just a magical, fun night, and I will never forget it.
The next step, a playoff game. Can you imagine what a home playoff game would be like at Cleveland Browns Stadium?
Yeah, that's what they have to aim towards. But again, it's not going to get any easier, because the Baltimore Ravens, I think, established themselves as a really, really good, formidable football team this year. Lamar has really kind of come into his own, and he's still really young and, still growing and learning. And, if Todd Monken sticks around, I mean, that offense is going to be dynamite. And I do think that matters. I think your offensive coordinator / play caller is huge. You see what's going on in Philly right now without Shane Steichen. You see what's going on in Indy with him. So I think that's key. So if they can keep Todd Monken there, then I think they'll be able to build on all the great things that they did this year, and they're going to be very tough to deal with. If Joe Burrow comes back really healthy and they can hang on to some of their receivers or add some pieces, then they're going to be a force to be reckoned with as well. So this is not going to be easy by any stretch. I mean, I'm sure the Chiefs are going to go out and try to fix some things that they didn't like this year. And so will other teams. So I just think it's going to be a tougher year next year to go out and try to win the AFC North.
Mary Kay Cabot, Browns beat reporter, now. I'm going to step aside, take a quick time out. Before we go to break, Browns did make a roster move. They signed defensive tackle Jaden Peavy, 6'5", 308 pounds, to a reserve futures contract. It's his first season. He is out of Texas A&M. Mary Kay tweeting that out. Mary Kay Cabot and I will be back talking Browns on Sports4CLE. We'll head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason when we return. Stay with us.
Holiday gold! The $20 scratch off?
It has a 100 times multiplier. I could win $1 million.
Psych! I got merry and bright.
No fair.
It has a 200 times multiplier. I could win $2 million.
Game on the back.
Game on the back. Game on the back! Game on the back! Game on the back! Game on the back! Game
We continue talking Browns with Mary Kay Cabot, Browns beat reporter from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hi, this is Rico. You know, looking at the season in totality, it was successful. Think about it. The Browns led the league in turnovers and led the league in injuries, especially to key players. You're not supposed to be a playoff team. I want to give a big shout out to Stefanski and Andrew Berry. You know, they overcame all those odds to qualify for the postseason. The next step for this organization is to be a consistent playoff contender. Stefanski did coach his butt off, and he deserves a contract extension. I want him to be here for the next 10 years, but we'll start with another 4.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Mary Kay, I agree wholeheartedly. I would assume you expect a contract extension and Andrew Berry as well. Is that something you think they're working on as we speak, potentially?
Yeah, it could be. I mean, by the time we get out there to talk to Andrew Berry this week, maybe something will be done in that regard, and that would be a fun way to conduct that press conference with him celebrating an extension. But sure, it's coming, and you know, they both deserve it. It was a very difficult year. They got through it, and unfortunately, it didn't end the way they wanted it to, or the way it really should have. But they would never have been in this position without the players that Andrew was able to bring in to solve some of the problems, such as Dustin Hopkins, such as Joe Flacco. And they certainly wouldn't have been able to get to that point without Kevin coaching, 4 different quarterbacks and all the things that they did to get to that point. So all in all, I think you can consider the season to be a success, considering all the injuries they suffered.
Yeah, and again, the disappointing loss in the playoff kind of is the last thing you remember. But remember, I think it ended up being 28 or 29% of their roster, of their salary cap, was on injured reserve, which, when you think about it, it's almost a third, and somehow you find a way to make the playoffs.
Yeah, it was pretty incredible. And one of the biggest reasons why they did that was because of Joe Flacco coming in. Mm-hmm. I mean, he was tremendous in those final 4 games of the season. And, if he had not been able to win those games, then they would not, they might not have made the playoffs at all. So that was a tremendous, tremendous save. I don't know if either PJ or DTR would have been able to get them there. There were just too many things that had to go right in those games. And Joe was able to pull that off and make some of those big, huge, explosive plays. And again, go 4-1. So pretty remarkable what they were able to do with the 4 quarterbacks after losing Nick, after losing their tackles. And hopefully people will see the good in the season, because there was plenty.
What do you think the most glaring needs are when you look at this roster moving forward?
Wide receiver, I would go out and I would get a really good premier number 1 type of receiver. I would assume that Amari Cooper will be back, but if he is, maybe they need to do something a little bit with that $24 million cap hit that he has. Maybe they will, maybe they won't, but I still think they need another blue chip type receiver to go along with him. I think if you really want to get to the promised land, that you have to do that. They might not see it that way. I do. I felt that way heading into this season. I thought they should have signed DeAndre Hopkins. I don't think you can have too many weapons in that regard. So that's a number 1 thing that I would do. And then beyond that, I've talked about this today on our podcast, our Orange and Brown Talk podcast, that I think they should try to bring Jacoby Brissett back. I think he would be really good. If Joe Flacco wants to go out and try to see if he can start somewhere or be kind of a bridge quarterback, I think Jacoby Brissett would be a great option for the Cleveland Browns. Gets along with Deshaun, would know his role in terms of being the mentor and, and the support guy. So I just think he would be tremendous. So that's another thing. And then I still think they need another double-digit sacker. I think you've got to, get some other guys that can get to the quarterback.
Yeah, and, Myles Garrett's still getting chipped, double-teamed, and hit by a running, it's like an obstacle course for him to get to the quarterback sometimes. This is from CBS Sports. Biggest questions facing each playoff team that was eliminated. And for the Browns, they say, can they simply bank on a return to health? Back to square one under center, Deshaun Watson returning from shoulder surgery, major questions of his own. It's now been 4 years since he played a full season of above-average football. Throw in Nick Chubb, Jack Conklin, two all-pros on the mend with pricey contracts. Offseason will be all about identifying which banged-up stars are worth building around. Health is always it's a physical game. Kevin Stefanski certainly sound pretty confident about Deshaun Watson.
He really did. I mean, he is all in. They are all in on Deshaun Watson, who, of course, as we all know, they gave up 3 first-round picks for, and they are in the midst of paying $230 million guaranteed to. That's $46 million a year. They've already spent 2 installments of the $46 million a year. So they're already, essentially more than $90 million into this venture. And, they need to get something from it. They need to get, they need to get a Super Bowl out of it. That's why they did it. So, they need to get there once or twice with Deshaun. That's what this whole thing was all about. So they have to hope that he comes back healthy from this fractured shoulder. Nobody really knows. There's not a whole ton of precedence in the NFL for coming back from a fractured glenoid bone in the NFL. But by all accounts, everything's going well. He might even be a little bit ahead in his rehab. And, they just really have to hope he comes back and is the Deshaun they bought into when they traded for him.
All right. This is from Spot Track, off-season notables for the Browns. So we mentioned Deshaun Watson, 23rd overall pick goes to Houston. That's their number 1 pick. Projected cap space, they're $13 million over. Free agents, Joe Flacco, Kareem Hunt, Zadarius Smith, Sione Taki. Extension candidates, Nick Chubb, Amari Cooper, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. Now, people look at that cap number and they can find, I think it's almost $80 million with restructuring, like Deshaun, Miles. There's a number of contracts they can restructure. Cap isn't going to become a question. Do you think they try to do something with Nick Chubb, assuming they think he's coming back, Amari Cooper, and the other one, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, he was all over the field in that game against the Texans. He really has had a nice year.
He really has. He really flourished in this defense. He really did. Now, he readily admits that his eyes were in the wrong place on the 76-yard touchdown catch and run by Brevin Jordan. It would have helped if the defenders in place to make the tackle had bailed him out a little bit on that. But none of that happened, unfortunately, for him and for the Browns. That was the backbreaker, proved to be the game-winning touchdown pass. But in addition to JOK, you've got Greg Newsome in that same boat, where he's eligible to have his 5th-year option picked up. And, those guys can also get extensions after this season. So lots of decisions to make. Amari Cooper has that $24 million cap hit next year we talked about. And, Nick Chubb, it's going to be, they're probably going to have to do something with his contract. Maybe they make it an incentive-laden contract. I'm not sure exactly what they're going to do there, but it will come as no surprises to anyone that they have to try to figure out something that works for everyone from the money standpoint with him.
Yeah, here's another one. This is kind of interesting. This is from Dog Pound Daily. 3 key players to re-sign to avoid roster holes. Number 3, Sione Taki, another linebacker that played pretty well no matter where they asked him to play. Number 2, Harrison Bryant, tight end who showed up late in the year and in the playoffs as well, and in that game leading into the playoffs. And number 1, Maurice Hurst, who was having a really good year before he got injured and out for the year. Mary Kay, those are three guys that probably aren't going to get huge contracts that I would assume, if they can re-sign them at a reasonable price, they do.
Sure, they'll try to, especially in the case of like a Harrison Bryant, when you're looking at a player who was an Andrew Berry draft pick. I mean, they like to hang on to those guys. They like to develop them. They don't give up easily on those guys. So, and the other guys are, and same thing with Sione Takitaki. I mean, he's a draft pick here. So, they always get, I think, a little bit, more run or more benefit of the doubt. But Maurice Hurst had a really nice season. He was contributing very well, and then and then he got hurt. So these are all guys that the door is definitely open for them to come back.
Mary Kay Cabot, Browns beat reporter for the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com, and I'm going to step aside, take another time out. Other side of the break, we'll head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Mary Kay Cabot, Browns beat reporter for Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hi, I just want to say that the loss against the Texans was absolutely horrible. I was just so disappointed in the defense, the offense, the coaching, everything, and it's really frustrating. And I just want to ask, how does Deshaun Watson come back? Because I still believe in him as a quarterback, but we're paying him all this money. And is he the answer for us to win a Super Bowl? Because how long are we going to keep sitting here and waiting? Like, Andrew Berry needs to make moves. We can't keep playing like this. The way we played yesterday was a joke, and right now the contract is not looking good. It's just frustrating. That's plain and simple. Like, we got embarrassed, and Andrew Berry needs to do something, because I would like to see a Brown Super Bowl before I die. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Mary Kay, the look at the teams that are doing well. It's, C.J. Stroud. You got to find the quarterback, and they identified Deshaun Watson as the quarterback. It's kind of interesting. And it was surprising to me. Deshaun Watson played more snaps than the other four quarterbacks this year. He played 383 snaps as Browns quarterback. Joe Flacco played 346. So they've only had him for 770 total snaps, being Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable. Now, I do think that he made a significant contribution to this playoff run. Technically, he was 4-1, but he also got credit for the Colts victory, so it goes as 5-1 on his record. But to come out of that locker room in the second half in Baltimore and beat the Ravens the way that he did on a high ankle sprain and a fractured shoulder, which is just mind-blowing, chances are they might not have even made the playoffs had they lost that game. That gives you momentum. It's a boost. It keeps things going. Had they lost that game, who knows where things go from there. So he was a big part of this. As we talked about before, Kevin Stefanski is all in, believes in him, believes that half showed what Deshaun Watson is all about. And I asked him this question the other day. When you were watching C.J. Stroud, did you think to yourself, we have a guy like that over here. He just happens to be in street clothes right now. And I think that is how they feel. I think they firmly believe that they have their quarterback, and that once they get him back on the field healthy, that it will be all systems go for them. We're going to have to find out. Again, this is year 3 of the Deshaun Watson experiment coming up. It's got to go well.
So the other question is, how did the players feel about Deshaun Watson? Joel Bitonio was asked about, how he feels about the offense with Deshaun Watson as a quarterback.
I think it's good. It's he was another one that every time it felt like we were taking a step, he got banged up or hurt. We beat Baltimore. Baltimore at Baltimore with Deshaun. They have a chance. They're still playing. They're playing next week in the division game. The Titans game, the Cardinals game. I'm pretty sure he was 4-1, as a starter this year. With our defense, if they played at the level we know and expect them to play to, I feel very confident with Deshaun coming back and being our quarterback.
And yeah, Mary Kay, the thing in Baltimore, the second half in Baltimore, that wins you over a lot of belief among teammates.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And these guys they already believed in him coming into the season. I mean, he was someone that did a lot of team bonding, team building things in the offseason, hosted another trip to Puerto Rico with the guys, got guys together in various other ways. So, he's pretty well bonded with this football team. And I think that, a lot of people want to make it out that, when Joe Flacco came in, everybody just switched their allegiance over to Joe. Everybody was so excited about Joe, and that's really understandable. But it doesn't mean that this whole football team abandoned Deshaun Watson. I think that's a misconception. I think that everybody will be completely on board with the program once they all come back together in the spring.
Another kind of interesting question, and I know you wrote an article about this. What do you think the reason is, number one reason, that Amari Cooper and David Njoku adjusted so quickly to Joe Flacco?
Well, I think it's the fact that he throws just such an incredibly catchable ball. And if you look at the 3 or 4 games before that, these guys were having difficulty adjusting to the passes that were being thrown to them. And then Joe comes in and it was just seamless. And I talked to a lot of people in Joe's life, career, whatever, and that was the number one thing, was that he just throws an incredibly catchable ball. It can be a bomb downfield, but it comes in very nicely. It can be an 18-yard out. It can be a pass that you need touch on into the end zone, a fade, whatever. He just throws a very nice catchable ball, and that had a lot to do with the seamless transition to him. And I think we've heard Amari talk about it. I don't know that we've asked David about it per se, but David was one who was dropping a lot of passes before that. He had this flurry of drops, and then all of a sudden Joe comes in and he just looked like a completely different player. So that was it.
All right, let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey, Dave. Frank from Cleveland. I just got to touch on one thing. Rico called in yesterday. He always has good points and everything. But to you, Rico, without Joe Flacco, we would have never been where we got. And he wouldn't be a bad second stringer. So go back, look at the last 5 games. Without him, we're not in the playoffs. Love you, Dave. It's a good show. I got upset when I heard that, Dave. Love you, brother.
As always, Frank, appreciates the voicemail. I think Rico's point was Flacco was never brought in to, be the replacement for Deshaun Watson. Mary Kay, let me ask you this. What do you think it looks like if Joe Flacco does come back? And it sounds like Kevin Stefanski would be open to it, but Joe Flacco may have the opportunity to be kind of one of those bridge quarterback guys coming up.
Yeah, I mean, he might. Nobody called him for the first 11 weeks or whatever, 10 or 11 weeks of the season. So, somebody would have to get interested in a hurry. But, he showed plenty. He didn't end the way that he wanted to, but he showed a lot in those 11 weeks. And if somebody runs that kind of an offense, that, that play action keeper game where you want to take big explosive shots down the field and you've got the horses to run it, he would be perfect for that kind of scheme. And there are plenty of offenses in the NFL that are like that. So I think, he might get an opportunity like that. If he doesn't get that chance, then certainly the Browns would be open to having him back, and he would want to be here.
Mary Kay Cabot, Browns beat reporter for the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com, as always. Thanks so much for the time and the insight. Appreciate it very much, Mary Kay.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Mary Kay Cabot, make sure you check her out. Always great Browns coverage. Pages of the Plain Dealer. You can also check it out online, cleveland.com. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. We continue talking Browns. Jeff Lloyd from the Locked On Browns podcast straight ahead. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
Holiday gold! The $20 scratch off?
It has 100 times multiplier. I could win $1 million.
Psych! I got merry and bright.
No fair.
It has a 200 times multiplier. I could win $2 million.
Game on the back.
Game on the back. Game on the back! Game on the back! Game on the back! Game on the back! Game.
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve. Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams, I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Oh, hey, Dave, this is Danielle. Hey, that game was definitely not the way we wanted the season to end. I mean, I'm very proud of the guys and reaching the playoffs and all that. I was just very disappointed. I think we could have finished better. I don't think we had to lose by 31 points. It was just kind of disappointing in that attribute. So that's all I really have to say. All right, I still love my Brownies. Woof, woof. Bye.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Let's welcome in Jeff Lloyd from the Lockdown Browns podcast. Jeff, I don't think I think it got away from in terms of the score. The 31 points a little misleading. A couple of back-to-back pick sixes. First one when they were driving down to actually potentially cut into the 10-point lead.
You had it 24-14 at that point, obviously. And the Browns, had gotten a stop to start the second half. Then you start moving the ball down the field. It was about 50-something yards at that point. You were there 1st and 10 at the Houston Texans 34-yard line. And I'd kind of talked about this, leading up to it. There had been mistakes Joe had been making. He obviously was going to need to play cleaner in the playoffs. You were going against better competition. Those type of mistakes are going to come back to bite you in the can in a situation like that. And, the first one that he threw and Steven Nelson intercepted, it kind of had like a cinematography feel to it where it felt like the ball was in the air forever. And I think we all kind of knew when eventually it came down, how it was going to turn out. I mean, it was one he absolutely needed to throw into the stands, throw to a coach on the sidelines, whatever. And then you come right back, and now you're certainly pressing, obviously. And Christian Harris, he was a guy acquired, was one of the draft picks. They got in the Deshaun Watson trade. He's a good coverage linebacker, not a great run linebacker, but a good coverage linebacker. Was able to jump the route. And, as quick as that is, it was over. There's also, playoff games kind of sometimes end like that. It's really, really difficult. I mean, because you realize that you're on the brink. And it's not just going to be the end of this week. It's going to be the end of the season. And, at that point when you're down, I guess it was what, you were down 31 and then turned to 38. It just got completely out of hand, unfortunately. Obviously, we all feel better about what this team did overall in 2023, but, a lot of people are still going to be stung by the way it ended, rightfully so.
Kevin Stefanski talked about if he's comfortable that they've built the right culture, also the difference between the defense at home, which was really good, and on the road, which struggled pretty much all season.
It's hard because these teams are different year to year. I mean, every single team has turnover. That's the NFL. So you have core things that you believe in your culture. You have core things that you believe in when it comes to your roster. And then there's core guys that, are leaders for this football team that we'll be counting on.
guys look defensively in the future?
Yeah, without a doubt. And I think, I don't want to lose sight of how good we were on defense this season. Historic. And, I think Coach Schwartz and the defensive staff did an outstanding job implementing the system in year one. Some really good moments for us and some young players that we're excited about.
Kevin, you guys gave up 13.9 points per game at home, over 31 on the road. We haven't had a differential like that in the NFL in 40 years. What do you make of it?
Something you're going to have to give me some time. I think we got to pull that apart and look at it. I mean, it is something that you have to get to the bottom of, and we'll look at it.
Yeah, and Jeff, that's going to be some long nights trying to figure that one out because something's there.
Yeah, well, I mean, you look at it in some of these losses on the road. You got to keep in mind, P.J. Walker, obviously, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, those guys started the Seattle. They started the Denver game. Obviously, not the best Browns quarterbacks this season by far. Joe Flacco, the game in L.A. was his first start. Keep in mind the Los Angeles Rams were also a playoff team. Obviously, we're able to, really get it going down the second half of the season. When you talk about that Seattle and that whole, the Denver, Los Angeles time, Mosley, although Myles Garrett was injured during that time, the shoulder wasn't right. The injuries were starting to mount up a little bit. But you certainly got to play more consistent. Obviously it's great that this team went 8-1 and, at home. It's definitely a statement to, obviously the fan base, the stadium, the culture. Obviously these guys get really, really revved up, but, the good teams. And, this was something that was going to happen for the Browns. And maybe something that a lot of us didn't cover enough is that this team wasn't successful enough on the road. And most likely for them to hopefully go on this long playoff run we were all maybe envisioning or hoping for, it most likely would have been nothing but, obviously, road games before they got to the Super Bowl. I think we're all still a little stung. And I think, for once in our lives, I think we're not surprised that they didn't, that they lost. I think we're surprised that we all just had higher expectations. Most people, was, hey, let's get ready and, turn on the Browns game and, let's see when, basically the part is where people reach out to us with sympathy. It wasn't the case here the way this team played this year. And, certainly Saturday and everybody looking forward to it. And obviously the crowd down in Houston and just how electric they were actually inside the stadium, when it still was a game. But look, there's always work to be done. There's always, room for improvement. No one's going to cry about the injuries. A lot of teams are injured this time of year, obviously. And you look at games that just happened over the weekend. A lot of guys who will be, on teams that'll be moving on, have been lost. But the future is bright. The culture is where you want it to be. And, I truly think that, the days and the laughter and the jokes about this franchise are well in the past.
All right, this one from the Bleacher Report. 3 big changes the Browns must make in the 2024 offseason. They have to keep the deep passing plan when Deshaun Watson returns. Cleveland's offensive scheme much more conservative with Watson under center. He had occasional deep shots to Cooper or Elijah Moore, but Watson averaged a full 1.1 air yard less than Flacco per attempt. Number 2, find a high-end number 2 receiver. Targeting a receiver like Michael Pittman, T. Higgins, Calvin Ridley in free agency would be difficult. Browns are projected to be $13 million over the cap, but not impossible. They do have ways of restructuring getting under that number. And also be a more aggressive in the draft. Cleveland could use more playmakers on each side of the ball, trading up for a prospect like Washington wide receiver Jalen Polk or Ohio State edge rusher JT Muamalo could help in those. I can't find fault with any of those, Jeff. When I look at those, I would agree with all of them.
Well, the thing is, and you look at some of these teams, and obviously what was one of the biggest plays from the Bills-Steelers game, obviously, was Khalil, Shakir. Obviously, they hit on a 5th-round pick. But the point is when you get to these games, obviously, these teams are trying to take away your best players. Amari Cooper was out there on Saturday. I think we all got to understand that Amari Cooper was not 100%, but he still, tried to gut it out, give it everything he had. But, other teams have guys that they can go to as well. And if you can continue to upgrade, you'd be foolish not to. I still think Elijah Moore can contribute. Maybe the fact that we think Elijah Moore can maybe play like a number 2. I think we got to stop taking guys and saying, well, they can be. I think we need to start looking at guys that you're bringing in and saying, oh, well, no, they are. And with the thing with a guy like Michael Pittman, and that's actually a pretty intriguing name, is because you need to look at somebody and not just say, do they have the potential to be a number 2 receiver? Do they have the potential to be a number 1 receiver? Look, Amari is still great, but maybe next year the production starts slipping a level. You never know, when that's going to happen. But Michael Pittman with over 100 receptions this year for the Indianapolis Colts. T. Higgins is interesting. I know Bengals fans would love to find a way for it to work out, but I think once teams start putting dollar amounts into T. Higgins's camp, about guaranteed money, I think that's going to make a tremendous difference as well, whether or not T. Higgins does go back. And as far as the draft, you are sitting in a difficult spot, and that's even one of the worst things about Saturday is, by losing that game, you gave Houston a better first-round pick, which, just seems to be, unfathomable. But, yeah, you've got to hit, obviously. There's no question. And I think the Browns have done a pretty good job drafting. And it's really hard when you're going to start late second round to say, to even think that maybe you're going to get a guy who can be a starter there. But, these guys got to get in here and be able to, hit the ground running a little bit sooner for Cleveland to keep this going. But Jalen Polk out of Washington, absolutely sign me up 110%.
All right, before we go to break, what positions do you think have on the roster have the toughest talks that had to be had? So when you look at the Browns roster, which positions are the ones that are intriguing?
Well, I think partly, running back, and I think because there's going to be some sentimental discussions there. I think everybody would love for Nick Chubb to come back 100%, but there's a realization factor of his age, the fact that he's already, suffered a significant injury in his time in Georgia, and you're going to have to bring in somebody. And this isn't that uncommon, because when the Browns first brought in Kareem Hunt at the time was one of the best running backs in the NFL. As much as we all thought of Nick Chubb, this seems weird, but the Browns need to bring in a capable running back. If Nick Chubb can still do it and they go back to what they had with Hunt and Chubb the first time these guys were together, gravy. Nobody's going to complain about that. The offensive line, there's going to be some things to wonder. Is Joel, and he spoke pretty well and he sounded like it, but I'm sure he's going to take a little time. He's going to reflect and see where he's at, how you're going to handle the tackle situation. Look, DeJuan Jones, we all love him. I think a lot more people appreciate Mr. Jedrick Wills right now after seeing Jerron Christian for 7-8 weeks than they ever did. You have Jack Conklin here. Even if all 3 remain, only 2 of them are going to start. And I think the wide receiver room is another one where, you're going to have some conversations, and certainly the quarterback position, because, you have Deshaun Watson, who's played, maybe 700, 800 snaps for this team over 2 seasons, didn't play it all the season before. And, you need somebody capable. And basically you're making that deal or working with that guy and saying, look, we're going to bring you here, but the hope is we never have to play it.
Jeff Lloyd from the Locked On Browns podcast. Now I can step aside, take a quick time out of the side of the break, back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Potential trade talk as well. Sports4CLE, we'll be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is dedicated to recognizing exceptional students, teachers, and schools throughout Ohio. Scan the QR code on screen to nominate students and teachers as Academic All-Stars and Teachers of the Month. They must be currently enrolled or teach in grades K through 12. Is your K through 12 school developing students' literacy skills to achieve success in reading? If so, you can nominate your school for the School of the Year. Students can win $100, teachers can win $500, and schools can win $2,500. Scan the QR code, fill out the forms, and nominate deserving students, teachers, and schools today. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program takes pride in honoring exceptional students, teachers, and schools across Ohio. Submit your nomination today. It's fun, fast, and free. We continue talking Browns with Jeff Lloyd from the Locked On Browns podcast. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey, Dave, Frank from Cleveland. Couple things. I want to congratulate the Cleveland Browns on a great season considering all the injuries. Number 2, we need to keep Flacco around. Can we make him the second stringer / quarterback coach or something? Teach these kids. Hopefully Jimmy Schwartz is coming back. And great show as always. And as they've been saying in the NFL, let's run it back one more time. Love you, brother. Be safe, you and the family, and I'll be in touch.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Jeff, I would imagine Jim Schwartz comes back. He seems to like it here unless somebody gives him the opportunity to be a head coach. Joe Flacco may get a chance to be a bridge quarterback. We've talked about this a little bit earlier in the show.
Yeah, well, with Joe, and the problem is, Deshaun Watson throws an incompletion in the first quarter of the first game of 2024. We know where this is going to go. And look, if you even just open social media today, everybody wants to bring back the Baker Mayfield conversations. So if Deshaun's your investment, you kind of have to protect your investment. Now, look, I'm not saying you shouldn't go out there and get somebody that you think is capable of playing. And I think also Joe, the way he carries him, I think he's just kind of respectful to the situation. This was, Deshaun Watson's band. Unfortunately, their leading man of the band, had to leave the stage for a while. So Joe had to jump in and try to make the music with the guys. And it was a magic ride. And I agree with you. Somebody, looking to draft a quarterback and not necessarily start him right away. And hey, if Joe were to give a whole season, and that's great. It's a fun idea, but I think this Joe Flacco, as far as being a Cleveland Brown thing, and look, I got no problem if you want to bring him back. I just think that this is going to be something, that we're all going to sit down and, we'll continue to tell that story for years to come, how one of the Browns' biggest villains came back to be, basically the hero of the day, the week, the month. Jim Schwartz, look, there wasn't a lot of people jumping around trying to, maybe say that they were thinking about bringing Jim Schwartz in to be the head coach. And look, that shouldn't be one way or another based on Saturday. You're not going to base anything out of one game. Is Jim keeping all options open? Certainly. But there's certain aspects of, being a head coach of an organization that are really, really a pain in the butt. And that also would mean, Jim's got to check in on the offense. He's got to check in on the special teams. And right now you look around and you're like, who would lead this? I've got corners. I've got safeties. I've got edge rushers. This is a really, really plump position. And Jim is not that old. It's not like he still couldn't get that next opportunity. Maybe now it's just not the time. But, yeah, and I'm more than okay. I would, Jim being back one more year, I think year two, you could probably expect maybe the consistency level of this defense as opposed to being, heroes and, just stoning teams one week, getting, blown away the next week or however it worked out. I think you would see a little bit more of a consistent pattern from this defense with Jim Schwartz and a lot of these guys as they went into their second year together.
So this one's from the Bleacher Report, predicting the biggest trades that could change the 2024 season. They say Browns receive Jerry Jeudy. Broncos get a 2024 second-round pick, 54 overall. According to ESPN's Jeff Legwood, Browns made multiple runs at acquiring Jeudy in 2023 and could once again push to acquire the pass catcher. I don't know how I feel about that one. Jeudy is a guy that I think, we talked a little bit last segment. He could be a number two. His production hasn't said that he's a number two yet.
Yeah, and there was always a weird dynamic the way the Denver Broncos had that wide receiver group set up, and and even earlier in the year, Russell's playing so much better. You went, you looked, and has anybody looked at what Russell Wilson has normally done in his career when he was in Seattle? It felt like we were trying to make some. Trying to make some stuff up to make it look like Russell Wilson. The bar was Russell Wilson prime. He was not Russell Wilson prime. And obviously a lot of changes are going to come down with that organization as well. It's a really good wide receiver class. And I think the biggest fear at this point early is, that there could be 10, 11 guys, but maybe 10, 11 guys go by 54. Then, of course, you got to start talking money. Because Jerry Jeudy's getting close to that point where you'll be talking about extending him. I'm not saying no, but you're going to play it out, obviously. And I do agree that we're foolish to think that there's not more weaponry that is needed for this offense, because once they got that vertical passing game going, you just saw, well, me, I thought it was there, and I think a lot of us did. You got to see the best version of David Njoku because you're always going to protect vertical first. And David Njoku, it's just simple. He is too fast for linebackers. He is too big for safeties. And once those are the guys that you got covering him, because you got to commit people deep, it makes for a really, really easy day like you saw that first quarter Thursday night against the New York Jets.
Yeah, there's a lot to like with him in the open field with the ball in his hand, without question. Again, I know you've addressed this on the Locked On Browns podcast. Who do you think's in for 2024? Who do you think is out for 2024?
This is kind of one where it gets difficult, Kareem Hunt. I mean, it was an amazing job what Kareem did this year, but all the yards were gained by toughness and just being an absolute bully. It's really hard to continue to play like that, and it's great to say, 9 touchdowns regular season, had the 2 touchdowns in a playoff game, but you really got to start looking to get in that room younger and getting that room better. And, look, Jerome Ford, again, 1,100 total yards in the regular season, 9 touchdowns. 16% of his carries went for negative yardage. And, you look at Nick and, even still, if Nick had gotten through this year healthy, you still have to back in your mind to say, when's it going to be? When's it going to be time? It's a running back. So, that's, something you're worried about. I think Nick will come back because he'd be foolish. And you saw this similar last year with Anthony Walker and Sione Takitaki. Once you've started, basically, the injury process, the rehab process, you don't really want to go to a new organization. You don't want to change everything. It's just not the right thing to do, in that type of scenario. The wide receiver room, Goodwin, Grant, those guys probably most likely are not going to be here. I think David Bell made a nice name for himself the last 2 weeks. Obviously, the regular season game for David Bell counted. The Bengals had their first stringers out there. He looked good, put up 8 receptions, doing the dirty work. I think both tight ends could possibly be gone besides David Njoku. You can kind of reset the clock on a guy like Harrison Bryant, get a younger guy. You might want to get a guy who can come in here with a little bit more of a blocking reputation. So maybe those are some of the reps that David Njoku can take off. I find it hard to believe that the Browns will have all 6 of their top offensive linemen on this team in 2024. And a lot of it is money related, of course. But, if you tell me that, obviously Will's going to be here, and of course, Batonio and Posick and Teller, and then Conklin and DeJuan Jones, I just find it hard that all 6 of those guys are going to be here. Defensive tackle, Jordan Elliott. I think it's time. Ika could probably get those reps. You want to bring back a guy like Maurice Hurst, Zadarius Smith. It's always a difficult position, and these are things I talked about with Jarvis Landry a couple of years ago. It's really a difficult decision to have when you just paid somebody $12, $13, $14 million, and now all of a sudden, when you're trying to say, hey, we're seeing 50%. 50% less. Like, that's basically why you tell these guys, hey, why don't you try to go have these conversations first? Get your name out there, have your agent do his business, because you don't want to be to tell a guy that you've had respect for, has been in your locker room, that all of a sudden now he's 50% monetarily of the player he used to be. Secondary, I think safety, you're going to be okay because it's just going to be Thornhill. It's going to be Delpit, and obviously Ronnie Hickman, who really showed pretty well other than the playoff game. The cornerback room, you're good, but Anthony Walker, maybe even Sione Takitaki. I mean, I would keep Sione around because the problem is I think Sione you can probably get on a cheap deal, and you got to keep in mind with that linebacker room, a lot of money is probably going to go towards JOK here soon. But yeah, it's that's one of the most difficult things about any season ending, because it starts to it's great. You may have loved this guy yesterday, but do you love this guy come September? And it leads for awkward and difficult conversations within the NFL.
Jeff Lloyd from the Locked On Browns podcast, and I can step aside, take one more time out. We'll head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. When we return, stay with us.
Holiday gold! The $20 scratch-off?
It has 100 times multiplier. I could win $1 million.
Psych! I got merry and bright.
No fair.
It has a 200 times multiplier. I could win $2 million.
Game on the back.
Game on the back. Game on the back! Game on the back! Game on the back! Game on the back!
We continue talking Browns with Jeff Lloyd from the Locked On Browns podcast. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
The sense of negativity associated with this organization is slowly evaporating. They just ran out of gas, and frankly, they ran out of good players to compete for the title. You know, we got to keep continuing to trend upward. They must become a consistent playoff contender, which in turn allows you to compete for the ultimate prize, the Lombardi Trophy. The Browns will be back. Dog Pound is here to stay. Thanks, guys.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Jeff, that's kind of the next step, make it back-to-back, and then back-to-back-to-back playoff appearances.
Well, what's the thing? Stacking wins, find a way to go 1-0 every week. But I agree with this general point. I'm not hearing these jokes anymore. I'm not listening to them. I don't want to hear nothing about this stupid quarterback jersey. This is a legit NFL franchise right now. And for the first time in a long time, they're going to start looking at their general manager and their head coach this time of year and saying, boys, come on in. We're going to sign some paperwork. We're going to keep you guys around here even longer. It's rare that, guys have been here for 4 years. That's very, very rare to begin with. But the fact that we're going to talk about these guys are going to be down here maybe 5, 6, 7, Kevin Stefanski is going to have, kids that, came here as, kids and are going to be, one day leaving the state of Ohio with driver's license, going to college and stuff like that. I mean, it's been a hell of a run for these guys. And, they had to put a lot of work in to get the stink off this franchise. And when they first took over, hey, guess what? Here is a national pandemic and we have no idea how to operate anything professional sports-wise. Good luck, boys. And found a way, very limited player contacts. How were we going to do the training camp? How are we going to do practices? This, that, and the other thing. Took their team to the playoffs. Ran through a whole weird quarterback dynamic situation in year 2. And granted, they brought this one on themselves. Year 3, put themselves even a weirder quarterback situation in year 3. But year 4, all of this adversity, players going down, guys turning around. There were times when the Browns were bringing in players, and they did it with Flacco. They did it with Jeff Driscoll. And I was texting to my buddy, they don't have a quarterback number for Joe Flacco. They don't have a quarterback number for Jeff Driscoll. That's how dry they are. That's how many players they have gone through. But these guys have busted their butts, and this organization is in some really, really good hands. And the thing is, and I've said this since early in 2020, is when you listen to Kevin talk and you listen to Andrew talk, you could close your eyes. And the point wasn't about who was saying it. It was about what was being said. And they spoke the same, what they valued, what they expected, how they looked out for their guys. And, hey, so-and-so's not at practice today. Had something going on. We gave him the day off. And a lot of people, there were times, look, you respect people as men, they're going to go that extra mile for you. And when it gets tough and it gets to a 4th down situation, it's small things, it's little things, but they mean a lot.
All right, so Denzel Ward talked about Jim Schwartz and his defense this year.
Impact is huge. I mean, like I say all the time, I can't say enough great things about Coach Schwartz. He's done a lot. He helped build the camaraderie on this team and help us grow, changed our defense and to being the number 1 defense in the NFL. So, I mean, he's a great coach, and he's done a lot for us, done a lot for myself, and what we were able to do this year. So, looking forward to continue to work with him, and he's a great coach.
So, Jeff, who do you think took big steps forward on the defensive side of the ball with Jim Schwartz this year?
I think a lot of people don't want to listen to this right now. But Martin Emerson, I think Greg Newsome had some really, really solid years. And I'm not going to not mention Denzel Ward here. Denzel's always been a really good player. We all know the deal. When Denzel's on the field, he's great. But, I mean, how as cornerbacks can you not love a defensive coordinator who basically comes in from day one and says, I got pass rushers and I got cornerbacks who can play man. And then about a couple of weeks into the season, tell you defensive backs, I think you guys should celebrate a little bit more. I mean, how is defensive backs hitting to fall in love with a guy like that? And then look, Maurice Hurst, here's a guy that we didn't know much about, but basically they took him and said, look, we're going to find a role for you, and you're going to find some success for the first time, legit success for the first time in your NFL career. You look at a player like Alex Wright going down the last part of this regular season and you're trying to rest people. Guys are banged up. Ogbo, you don't know if he's going to be in, he's going to be out. And Alex Wright each week getting better and better and better. In the last 4 regular season games, gets you 4 straight sacks. But if you're going to put one name basically on the top of this totem pole, there's no question about it. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. And what and I got a lot of messages and text messages sent my way Saturday. And obviously, he was the one guy that was consistent, take away, obviously, the long 75-yard touchdown to the tight end Jordan. But he was the one guy on Saturday. And I was like, guys, you don't get it. This has been the case all year. Go back if you want. Go back and look. His read and recognition skills have just vastly, vastly improved. You got to keep in mind, he was a hybrid player at Notre Dame. Really, really was never, committed to being a full-time linebacker. The Browns, first couple of years didn't work out. He was dinged up, and then there was the weird dynamic of Anthony Walker. It's the only talkie, JOK. And then this year they just basically gave it to him and just said, go get it. And, he was able to get after the quarterback, was able to get interceptions, was able to fly all over the field. I am really, really excited about the future of JOK. I think he is by far, but a lot of guys certainly took the step. I mean, you could mention a guy like Ronnie Hickman as well. But there's something about playing with a guy like Jim Schwartz that basically just, and Jim Schwartz will probably be the same way in the building and will tell Coach Step, you guys do offense. That's the easy stuff. And, you guys get to know what you're doing. We've got to anticipate. We've got to react. And it's the harder side of the ball to play. And, once you taste success and, you just crave it more. And for a lot of these guys, finding it, and, the Browns, we used to talk Myles Garrett when we talked about the Cleveland Browns defense. And, you can make friendly wagers with friends if they can name 3 or 4 other starters. This defense is long, it's deep, it's got a lot of talent, and just more guys are going to continue to come in here.
Jeff Lloyd, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Jeff.
All the best, Dave. Look, sun also rises. Got to do what you got to do. It was tough Saturday. There's no question about it. But, hey, if you truly want to be excited about the future of this franchise, you'd be a fool not to, even if you still have some bitter feelings towards Saturday.
All right. Make sure you check him out. Jeff Lloyd from the Locked On Browns podcast. Always good Browns coverage. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.